ancients is a cool thing to do, and I do believe it's important because there's something that happened, and we're going to get into this. There's something that happened to the ancients. There's a reason why it's so mysterious. And I think that if we don't learn about that, it's just going to happen again. And it would break my heart for us to have made it this far technologically, for us to go back to the dark ages and start over again. And I fear that that's possible if we don't learn from the mistakes of the past. So
I think that's a perfect lead into starting to talk about some of these cycles that have happened in history. I'm not the best historian in general, but I am fascinated with so many different things in life. And so I tried to kind of chronologically put in order some of the ancient civilizations that are hot topics of mystery, whether or not they existed or where it is and what it was all about. And of course, the main aspect that is the most interesting is the technologies and just how things were made and what kind of technologies they had, looking at ancient Egypt and being there and to see where it's at in the time frame that it existed. And you go, like, we'd have a hard time doing that now, like there's things that will be difficult now that they can't even figure out how to engineer. So clearly there was different technology. And the question, of course, is who did that technology come from? And so almost like closing the loop from the very beginning when we started talking about stars is, one of the things that's so common, such a common thread within so many of the civilizations is their use of the stars, and especially Orion's belt and the three stars of Orion's belt, and those correlating with the Great Pyramid and the other two. And then that happens. There's lots of other similar situations in different places in the world. So if we're going back, like probably one of the most interesting things that I think is getting more attention more recently is the Younger Dryas period, where, there was potentially there wasn't potentially, there was a cataclysm. There was something that hit Earth, a comet, an asteroid, something like that. And it sent the world into extinction, essentially. And they can even find like soot and ash and all kinds of things as a layer in the soil to confirm this. And they learn all this through carbon dating and things like that. But the Younger Dryas period being about, what was it, somewhere around 11 to 13,000 years ago. So
yeah. 11,600 is like the onset, is what they say. Well, there was a couple events, and one happened like 12,800, and then the other 12,600. So like in the middle of it is the Younger Dryas, where there's this deep cooling. And so like you said, like this is scientific fact. What you have is as validated through core ice samples from Antarctica and Greenland, which show that the Earth went through these cycles of extreme heating and cooling, rapid thawing of or rising of the global sea levels because of thawing of the ice caps. More than 30% of the entire Earth's landmass is covered in that soot you're talking about. Signature traces of a cosmic impact, including nanodiamonds, sphericals, melt glass, iridium, all traits that are proven to have come from a cosmic impact. In fact, they even say that at that same period of time, there was global fires, they think larger than even the during the impact event that was said to have wiped out the dinosaurs. And it's like, and then with that came a extinction level event. This is just North America that I'm about to cite, but 75% of all mammals in North America went extinct at that same period of time. And they found like there's evidence of a cataclysm. They found woolly mammoths with food in their mouths, and they're like knocked over and frozen with their legs broken, like something poof them over. A woolly mammoth, bunch of them too. And it's like something happened, and the evidence is there. And some people say this is like the biblical legends of a flood, that the Earth's sea levels rose X amount of feet in a relatively short period of time. Most people lived on or near the coast, and it was like essentially a reset for whatever was going on before that. It was just epic. Hell on earth.
Yeah, obviously. And the way that plays into it is kind of in some of the next information, which I know you've talked a lot about, which is Atlantis, and whether or not the disappearance or the extinction the sinking, not the sinking, the covering up of Atlantis happened at that time when you came out of the Younger Dryas and the ice caps melted, and then, you know, things were flooded. So, but I'm wondering, as far as like timeline goes, where do, like, because I was looking stuff up because I was curious too. I'm like, man, how does this all fall in? Because I thought of all the things that I'm kind of curious about. So I thought about the Anunnaki. I thought about Sumerians, Egyptians, Mayan culture, Roman culture, and Atlantis. And so like, that's actually the order in which they came out as far as the order. But that, so where does Atlantis come next in the timeline, or is it more or is it the Anunnaki? Like, can we talk about the Anunnaki and
let's do that.
Who they were or who we think they were?
There are some, I'm going to make a video on this. There are some that believe that the survivors of Atlantis. So to anyone listening that hasn't heard this, like, Atlantis isn't just a Disney movie. It is a legend that comes from the Egyptians, and they discuss how, and this is like 2600 BC, and they said 9,000 years earlier, there was an event that caused the destruction of this advanced civilization, or by advanced, like, people should consider relatively, it means that they were more advanced than what people thought. Like, it doesn't mean they're more advanced than 2022. But anyway, and the date on that is precise to the Younger Dryas. So to me, I'm like, it's scientific evidence that there was a civilization that got obliterated, because it's like, it's too much of what a coincidence is that? There's some evidence that would suggest the survivors of Atlantis essentially went and repopulated, because they talk about these 7 sages. So this is where things get wild, because I remember looking into the story of Atlantis. It came from Plato, got it from Solon, and he talks about like Solon being the wisest of the 7 sages, but it turns out the Sumerians had their own 7 sages.
And the Sumerians are what we believe to be one of the oldest cultures or civilizations that we have proof of.
That's so, according to the academics, yes, that is the first known documented human civilization. However, we know,
and that was before that, about what year?
6,000 years ago.
Okay, so about 4,000 BC.
Yeah, precisely. And so, and what's so wild, and you're talking about Anunnaki. So, to anyone not familiar, it's like some people suggest that beings came from other worlds and created us and gave us knowledge and everything else. And what's so wild about it is that if you look at some of the earliest tablets, the Sumerian tablets, some of those, I wish I could show you a photo right now, but they show like these beings on like this bird-like craft sitting on it, and people looking up at them, holding their hands up. And I'm like, are they trying to like show us, you know, is it like an alien spacecraft, so to speak? And it's right. Like, there's some weird stuff. And they have this tablet showing what some, I think, is the solar system. So it's like, yeah, I mean, this is taboo. This is conspiracy to some people. They're done. Of course, we're not aliens. It's like, but I'm like, in my back of my mind, I think it's very possible, because I think humans are a very weird species. I think I'll just say, I think we're half alien. I think that something came here and tampered with us, and here we are. People think I'm wrong and crazy. Fine, whatever. I don't care. I bet you it's true. I can't prove it.
That's so funny. I just posted a story about the fact that they just hired 24, I think NASA maybe hired 24 theologians to study how the humans would respond to aliens. An alien encounter. And my friend sent me a message back, and she was like, we all already know it. Just let everyone know you're an alien.
That you are? That
yeah.
Patrick is?
You know, skipping ahead for a second to Egypt. I mean, it's all temples. It's all temples. Like, there are pyramids, but they're completely undecorated. There's nothing, they're just, I mean, we'll talk about it when we get there, but the temples are like, there are so many of them. And we'll talk about what we think they were, but it just shows how much commitment and dedication to a spiritual practice that they had, that they would have so many temples. Where do we fall then with like Anunnaki, Sumerians, Atlanteans, and that whole dynamic? Like, what order did they come in, and then what led to the next thing?
Well, that's a good question. I think, let me just say, so I do, first of all, think that we're like this hybrid species. And if that's true, I think it happened a really long time ago, but I don't know what that means. Like, I don't know if that means hundreds of thousands of years ago, a million. I really don't know. But I have this feeling, because we're such this weird species, we don't seem to assimilate in our environment whatsoever. We look like if you look at a city from space, it looks like a cancer spot. Like, we we need shoes just to go outside and stuff. Like we can't even do anything. Like we're this weird, and we're just, I don't know, we're this weird species that destroys ourselves. And so like to answer your question, I don't know when that, if that's true, if that's the case, if you're like this hybrid species, and I don't even dismiss evolution. I think that there's evidence of like things are always evolving and adapting. Things are always in a state of change. So I don't disagree with it. I just think there's more to the story. But so to answer your question, I would say that something happened, and then maybe the Sumerians or whatever were trying to explain that, but it's hard to say. All I know is that the Sumerians came, they were around 1500 years before the Egyptians, so-called Egyptians, started doing the spectacular things like the most impressive pyramids, say the pyramids of Giza. Whether it's Atlanteans way before them, because it's worth mentioning, a lot of people aren't aware that the Egyptians themselves say, and this is inscribed on the Temple of Horus, I believe, where they say that came from the island of the, quote, primeval ones that had survived a cataclysm, and they repopulated down in Egypt. And this kind of coincides with what I'm researching now as far as the Sumerians talking about 7 sages, and that the theory is that people who survived, that maybe, let's pretend Atlantis existed and they were relatively advanced and doing cool stuff. Some people survived if they got obliterated by a cataclysm, and they went around to different places to repopulate, spread the knowledge, rebuild.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's truth to that. That would be my best bet.
The Atlanteans is proposed that it flooded, and that some of those Atlanteans, were able to survive and repopulated in Egypt then, on the Nile. And that's where the story continued. It became, from there on out, it was thousands, or whatever you're going to tell me how many years later that, that it became a metropolitan and became what it is, as what we would know it today. But the Sumerians were, a part of that as well.